So I want to talk about this very fancy title because I'm a strong believer that indeed working with other cultures can open new eyes. And I have to tell you a little bit more about myself to tell you why I got interested in this subject. First of all, you might have guessed from my name that I'm not from the UK. I come from a country that is much more famous for beers, chocolates, football players. I'm from Belgium. Yeah. Nobody seems very impressed with that, but so I'm from Belgium. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I also am a psychologist. Now, unlike some of my colleague psychologists, I didn't study psychology because I had problems with myself. That came later. I studied psychology because I was actually interested in how do human beings learn. And therefore, if you think about it, being Belgian, a very small, though extremely beautiful country, and on the other hand, being a psychologist, it was quite obvious that I got interested, how can you learn from other cultures? And I've been doing this for the last 25 years or so, helping groups everywhere in the world. I think I counted it once in 67 countries in the world, helping groups trying to get better at dealing with other cultures. I read everything that there is to read about it. So at a certain moment, I started to think, yeah, I must be very good at this, yeah. And then something happened a couple of weeks ago in this place. This is in Napoli. This is a very famous pasticceria. It's called Gambrinus. It's very well known for two things, which is coffee and cake. And I was there on holiday, and I was standing there like these people. And at that moment, I was getting a little bit annoyed because these baristas, they were talking with each other, not with any client. And then the queue was really an Italian queue, and people were getting in front of me, yeah? And I was getting annoyed. Now, I was not on my own in that holiday. My wife was with me. And one of the very many qualities that my wife has is she gives me feedback without me asking for it. and she felt the need to give me feedback, and she says, Jean, it's very strange. You teach this stuff everywhere in the world that people should be how to deal with other cultures. And here you're in a situation, and it's like, yeah, you forget it, yeah? So it took me some time to digest the cake and the feedback. And when I did that, I started to think, yeah, but why is that? And do I recognize this? Because what I want to focus on now is perhaps more what stops us from learning from other cultures than what is the opportunity. Because sometimes I work a lot with senior managers, and then they say to me, Jean, we don't need this. We don't need any of this cross-cultural stuff because the world is flat. Yeah? And we know it all. We visit a lot of other companies, cultures. We know it. The world is flat. And that's probably partly true. But then I came across this quote from a guy who used to run Intel, that the world may be flat, but it's still filled with potholes. And I think one of the biggest potholes that stops us from really having the world flat is culture. And don't get me wrong, I'm not implying that culture is the most important part of doing business, but very often I think it's the most ignored part of doing business. And what happens very often is that people get the illusion that the world is flat. And why is that? Well, when I teach programs, I very often teach programs to international managers who have indeed had an international career. So most of them are not necessarily representative of their culture anymore. When they do business in other cultures, they meet people who are also very international. So what you get is actually a cultural deviant from one culture meeting a cultural deviant from another culture, and therefore they feel we are more or less the same. And this story came true a couple of years ago. I was in Brazil with a Norwegian company who does fertilizer. So they do fertilizer, and I remember it very well. We were going to visit some of their clients, like here, a plantation of sugarcane. And I thought, yeah, we better give them some introduction on cross-cultural working. And the night before they were going to visit that was planned. And they came to see me and they said, Jean, we don't need this. We really don't need this. We are international experienced people because the world is one. Yeah? And I thought, yeah, it might be for you, but tomorrow, if you're going to meet this person, he probably has a completely different view. And perhaps for him, the world is not as flat as it is for you. So there is this cognitive thing that we think we know it, and therefore we can do it. And of course, my experience in Napoli proved that that is not a guarantee. So that's the cognitive part. But there's also, of course, this emotional part that stops us from learning from other cultures. And this is another holiday. I went many, many years ago on holiday to learn how to scuba dive. And I went to an island with 50 Italians, 10 English people, and 1 German. I know, strange idea of holiday, but anyway. And on these holiday resorts, you do things together. So we're having lunch, and at a certain moment, you could see a school of dolphins. And these Italians, they saw these dolphins, stood up, delfine, delfine, incredibile, incredibile. Yeah? The English, after having complained that they didn't have a kettle to make tea in their bungalow, the English said, oh my God, there are some dolphins. Yeah? The German took his clipboard and started to count the exact number of dolphins, but that last part is a joke. But the Italians and the English, they really were looking at each other, what is this? And of course you're thinking, Jean, what has this to do, what happened to you on holiday with learning from other cultures? Well, exactly what happened on that holiday is what I see in companies happening. Yeah? Because first of all, why did the English and the Italians notice it from each other? Because we are very much focused, and that's well known as a psychologist, to look at differences more than about similarities. In the 25 years that I'm interested in this subject, there's not a single company who has ever asked me, Jean, do a session on cross-cultural similarities. Nobody ever asked me that. It's all about do a session on cross-cultural differences. And then when we see these differences, the emotional trap we fall into is we start to judge. And what do you think? The English and the Italians, they judge each other. The Italians said, che cazzo, and they are so boring. The English said, these Italians don't know how to behave at lunch. So you immediately start judging, and you judge, it makes you feel uncomfortable. So what do? For the rest of the holidays, you had always the Italians together, you had always the English together. And of course, they don't have to spend time. And I know at work, in international companies, you have to spend time together. But still, if you can't get over that hurdle that you judge other people because they are different, you're going to do it because you have to do it, but you're never going to get the full potential out of that. Yeah? So then sometimes people, they ask me, Jean, but how do we deal with this? How can we, because you talk about the cognitive and the emotional hurdle, but we live in a global world, we work with international people, we work in international teams, so what can we do? And I think one is, first of all, awareness and understanding. Yeah? Awareness and understanding, but not like this. I'm always intrigued when you read books like How to Do Business with Japanese. Very often, it's a series of stereotypes. And then the Japanese reads a book, How to Do Business with Americans, yeah, which is a much shorter book. And then they actually think, okay, Japanese, I have to shake hands. And the American things, I have to bow. But it has to go deeper than this. But the international world of business people feeds also this. Another example, this was a Swedish bus manufacturer who were thinking of what is the bus that we're going to launch in China. All these people from the Swedish management team, they had talked to the Chinese people of the joint venture partner. Yeah? And they had come to this idea, we have one bus that might fit eventually the Chinese market. And I was helping a project team who was coming up with that strategy, and I said, yeah, what do you think? No, it doesn't work. I said, what have you done till now? Well, we've been in Shanghai, yeah? We've been in Hong Kong. I said, yeah, but that's different, yeah? Why don't you go to some of these villages or to these province cities and ride a bus? And perhaps that might inform you much better about what is needed for the buses in China. But very often, when we stay at this level and we don't go a little bit deeper to understand, it probably doesn't work. Now, awareness and understanding is, of course, something that people like me can help you with. The thing that I can't help you with, and which is actually finding the similarity instead of focusing on the differences, because that's your job, actually. And very often when you look at companies, they look too much at similarities, and you can have pictures of management boards and they all look the same. So I've been looking, is there a group of people where you have on the one hand a lot of differences and a lot of fun also because they are so different, but on the other hand have enough similarities so that they can actually get along. And I found this group. Harley-Davidson. I mean, everybody knows Harley-Davidson, yeah? I mean, if people tattoo your name in their body, yeah? Can you imagine that, yeah? Hult, the most relevant business school. So, if people, yeah? If that means that you have a very, very strong brand. Now, if you go and talk to these people, and this is from a rally somewhere, I think, in the US, this picture, you're going to find doctors, you're going to find professors, you're going to find secretaries, you're going to find a lot of different people. Why do they get along very well? Well, they all love Harley-Davidsons. And I think we have to focus indeed on the two to learn. You have to focus on the similarities, not too many, and then you can much better deal with the differences. But I know this is all easier said than done, because the most important part to make this successful is unfortunately something I cannot teach you. And it comes from a song that says, what you want, baby, I got it. What you need, you know I got it. But all what I'm asking for is a little respect. And I think that is unfortunately your choice. I mean, unfortunately, in terms of we can't help you with this is your choice. If I'm looking at an Italian being emotional, shouting Delfini, that is not better or worse than saying, oh my God, there are some dolphins. And I think that is the most important part. And then you can start to learn. But very often we are obsessed with the superficial, see as many cultures as we can. But it only will work if you have this respect and open and curious attitude. And I was looking for a quote from a Belgian philosopher, but I didn't find that because we don't have philosophers. But I found a quote from a French philosopher, probably with Belgian roots, Marcel Proust, and he said, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new lands, but seeing with new eyes. Thank you very much.